Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with our meeting. Time is 6:01. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, I don't know of any additions or deletions. Does anybody have anything need to add or take off, try to remove from the agenda? Doesn't appear to be so. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
So moved.
Roll call order.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. And
I abstain. I was not present.
okay. Well, we have the four to pass the phone, so we're good with the meeting minutes. Okay, we're here for appeal number 23-003. The Water's Edge Dock and Hoist has requested a public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals for Craig and Jennifer Bilecki of 19516 Park Lane to extend the waterfront structure more than 12 feet into the canal on lot number 35 in the Supervisor's Grosse Ile Subdivision number 4 as recorded in the Wayne County records. The Township of Grosse Ile, County of Wayne, Michigan. Do we have any public comment on this particular item? Anybody from the public? Does not appear to be so. Pardon me? Yeah, we'll go to Brian's presentation next. Well, Brian, I guess we're up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable board members, thank you for being here tonight. Before I get into the presentation and discussion on our case tonight, just a quick housekeeping item. I want to make sure when we find ourselves in this situation, I want to make sure A, the board is up to speed, B, the public and the petitioner, make sure everyone's on the same page and understanding. So under state law, in order for a ZBA to grant a dimensional variance, it has to be by a majority of the membership. We are a 7-member body. We only have 5 members present this evening. It does take a vote of at least 4 in order to pass a variance tonight. So just keep that in mind when we get to that point. It will take either a 5-0 vote or a 4-1 vote to grant a variance. A 3-2 vote is a denial. So I want to make sure, again, board, public, petitioner, make sure everybody understands the process that we're dealing with tonight. If we find ourselves at a bit of an issue or an impasse, and either the petitioner feels as though they would like to postpone action, they can certainly request that. We have, generally speaking, we've allowed that in the past when we've had this same situation. The board could also be in that position where if you feel you need additional information or you feel that there are too many issues, you could postpone action in hopes that we do have a full contingent as well. But I wanted to make sure, again, everybody understood that before we move any farther.
Does the petitioner understand that as well? I mean, are we clear on that? Okay, and do you want to proceed or do you want to try to reschedule?
We're good.
You good? Okay, very good.
Thanks. Okay, so our loan case this evening, it's a dimensional variance request for the property at 19516 Park Lane. The subject site is this guy right here, west side of Park Lane. This aerial photo is directed so that north is up. So this is Park Lane, this is the canal, this is the existing residence, and then back behind this tree line, which you can't see it, would be the shoreline of the subject property. So everything in this particular portion of Park Lane, so essentially the west side, if you will, is within R1B single-family zoning. The request that's before you tonight is for the installation of a new dock for this property with a 20-foot encroachment into the canal. So from ordinary high water mark / shoreline into the canal by 20 feet. The zoning ordinance only permits up to a 12-foot encroachment into interior canals. So that's the issue that we're here to discuss tonight. So I've got a little bit more on that coming up. Left side of the screen, section 23.5B of the Township Zoning Ordinance. These are the review standards the board is to apply in making its decision on a dimensional variance. So we have, obviously you have a review letter that evaluates all of the criteria. Many of them are very similar in nature. The key findings, of course, being practical difficulty, substantial justice, presence of an extraordinary circumstance. Those are the items that I will generally focus on, though, again, you do have a full review letter that comments on all of the items. So as I mentioned previously, what we're dealing with specifically tonight is section 17.4A, paragraph 5 of the Township Zoning Ordinance. This establishes a maximum encroachment into an internal canal of 12 feet for allowable accessory waterfront structures. Accordingly, petitioner seeks one variance at this point, and that is related to a 20-foot encroachment. So essentially, it's a variance of 8 feet beyond what the ordinance would allow. And again, the section is 17.4A, paragraph 5. I did point out in my review letter, and based on the way the submittal was drafted, it was unclear to me whether or not they felt a second variance may also be needed. So I do want to make that part of the conversation. I'm hopeful that the petitioner can clear this up tonight when they get their chance. But the way it was written up, there's, at least in my mind, it created some confusion as to whether the request also complies with the navigable waterway width of Article 17 as well. And specifically, that is you have to maintain at least a 30-foot clearance across either the center of the canal, or at least based on the depth of the water, there has to be a 30-foot navigable width through the canal. I believe that it's met, but I don't want to rely just on my belief. And we did put forth, you probably noticed many times over in my review letter, I identified the need for the applicant to demonstrate that this standard is met and or proving that they will not in any way disrupt the navigability, if you will, of this particular waterway. So if that is not met, then that is a second variance, and that is from 17.4A, paragraph 4. So I couldn't find anything that explicitly tells me that it is for sure met. We did do some research actually earlier tonight. Staff and I went through some old files. We looked at the plat book for this neighborhood based on at least the information we could obtain. This is a pretty wide area for the canal. And like I said, I believe that it will be met, but I want some hard proof and evidence for the board to feel comfortable moving forward with that. So that'll be something we'll need the petitioner to address when they take the podium. So beyond that, this is essentially the plan. So originally, this came into the township as a full depth was a 40-foot structure. So there was essentially 20 foot of dock, or there's more than 20 foot of dock, and a boat lift that was included. That was approved by both Eagle and the Army Corps of Engineers. However, it did not meet our requirements at the township, the 40-foot encroachment obviously being even greater than the 12-foot you're allowed. We did have a pre-application meeting with the contractor and applicant for this particular request, and we did kind of go through some of the ideas, some of the ordinance standards, and specifically the variance review criteria. And of note, we talked a lot about their ability to minimize the extent of the variance that was needed, and hence it's been cut back to a 20-foot dock from originally the 40-foot that was submitted. So it is a lesser request than it would have otherwise been. And we do have a few photos, obviously, thanks to Mr. Schweikert for his photographic skills and his ability to navigate the road closure in this particular area and make his way down there. So this is a view of the shoreline of the subject site, and it's essentially looking kind of southwest down the canal, if you will. So this is back, what I would just say, down the canal, if you can follow my understanding of that. I can go back to the aerial if that helps. So in essence, that's this way. and we have a couple others. And then this is essentially a straight-on shot. So this is the waterfront yard of the property. This is the dock that they are seeking approval for to install. This would be directly opposite them across the canal. This would be looking northeast up the canal, if you will. And then this is the adjacent property owner who is kind of at the corner there at Park Lane. You can see their waterfront structure, their dock lift, et cetera, right in this particular location. And then lastly, another view looking back down the canal. It gives you a good idea, again, of some of the references in both the submittal and my review letter of some of the existing structures that are already in this particular area at this location in the canal. And again, a reference point to the fact that there are several that do encroach beyond the 12-foot limit that is currently allowed by ordinance. To take that one step further before I get into my review comments, we did, as I mentioned earlier, staff and I did go through some of the property files for some of the homes in this neighborhood. We really didn't find a lot of very helpful information. We did not find any variances that had been granted for these encroachments. We did find one that definitely predated the ordinance, so that would be considered non-conforming under your ordinance. We found one that was actually in accordance with the ordinance, so it was compliant. And we found another one that had absolutely no information about the existing dock. So probably non-conforming. It's possible that, you know, some of them could be illegal, but we have no evidence to prove that. So generally speaking, when that's the case, they're deemed non-conforming at that particular point.
Ask you a question about this,
Please.
about this particular photo. So the one we're looking at right now, that dock, that's
Across or
shooting
down?
out.
Same
The
side?
one right there, you're shooting, you have your cursor on right now with the roof on it. Yep. How do we know how far that one is into the canal?
So there were some, I don't,
Okay.
but the petitioner did include several aerial photos with some dimensions on them. I'm not sure whether this one in particular is, it's kind of hard to rectify the real world 3D view versus the top down view as to which is which.
Right.
So I'm not sure if this is one that is depicted. There is one that's depicted, which I believe is southwest of the subject site, that is roughly 40 feet into the canal. But I cannot, I can't guarantee you that the structure I'm looking at on this drawing is in fact the structure that's in that photograph.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. And I can go back to the aerial or the plan or any of those photos at any point if you'd like. So just to sort of summarize my review letter, starting point with practical difficulties. So in this case, strict compliance with the ordinance results in a water depth of 10 inches per the petitioner. That is quite shallow, and in this case, I do think that that's something you could, if the other standards can be demonstrated to be met, I do think you could view that as unnecessarily burdensome. A 10-inch water depth at the permissible 12-foot line for a dock is quite shallow for almost any boat. I guess a kayak you could potentially not have an issue with, but I certainly see the difficulty, in my opinion. So put that forth. So another thing that we talked about, I mentioned we did have a pre-app meeting with the petitioner. So one of the other things we talked about was that in my eyes, the most obvious alternative to going farther out into the canal to get an increased depth was to dredge at the shoreline within the permissible area. We did talk about that, and I know the petitioner did have some contact with the folks at Eagle. That's the state, and I apologize, that's the Department of Environment and Great Lakes and Energy, or Energy, Great Lakes and Environment. It's the old DEQ.
Okay.
So just to make sure we're clear on that. So they're the regulating body for the state of Michigan for waterfront structures in this particular case. So they did indicate that what their goal is to minimize impacts on waterways and to the shorelines. And so the idea of dredging this further to increase the depth was generally viewed as more impactful or potentially more of a disturbance to the waterway than the additional footage increase for the dock itself. So hopefully that makes sense. But that's what I viewed as the primary alternative. They did put forth a reasonable argument as to why that alternative could not be pursued, I guess, and why they felt the dock was the better approach. I did mention earlier when I showed you the plan that originally this was submitted as a 40-foot dock. It has been reduced down to a 20-foot dock, so they have reduced the extent of the variance that they would have otherwise been requesting. And then yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Out of curiosity.
Please.
40-foot dock, how wide is the canal? Do you know there?
That's the big question tonight. We're going to look for a more explicit answer from the petitioner. I mentioned earlier we did do some research through the plat book, through some property files. I did my best to try to scale it on Google Maps. The Google Maps scale jumps so erratically, I'm not sure that it was accurate or not. On the plat book, that was sort of the best document I had to look at, but you got to remember shorelines can change over time, and those plat books are pretty old. It's scaled to about 100 feet from what I would presume was edge to edge. So, as I mentioned, it is pretty wide for a canal.
Brian,
So 100 feet, let's say it might be 100 feet.
90.
40 foot would put it in the middle, almost.
Right, they're not
What about-
asking
what
for
about-
40 feet. They're not asking for
No,
40
I'm
feet.
just
They're asking for 20.
trying to understand the 40. There was some evidently action that, previous that would have put it at 40. I think, if I read this right, it was confusing.
They originally submitted for a 40-foot
Yeah,
dock.
yeah.
That was approved by Army Corps and Eagle/DEQ, by Eagle.
They
So-
proved that.
Correct. But it doesn't meet township standards.
Right.
So they're looking at different things. And again, as part of the discussion of their need for a variance, they scaled the project back.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
Yep.
I was just going to say, I use Google Earth measurement function, and it's 90 feet wide at that point.
The
90
full
feet.
canal.
90?
90, 90.
90, okay. So it's about the middle of 40 would have quit.
Keep in mind, they're asking for 20 feet, not 40 feet. Okay. Well, that's what we're reviewing. 40 feet should be out of your mind. I referenced 40 feet to show you that they've scaled the project back. They've minimized the amount of variance needed. So it was just for relationship perspective. Thanks. So I've alluded to this earlier. The depth at the permitted encroachment level is relatively shallow. The property is also somewhat irregular in shape, so I believe that there's a case could be made that there is a unique circumstance here or an extraordinary condition that helps demonstrate the need for a variance. We've also talked a little bit about this one. There are clearly other waterfront structures in the immediate area that do encroach past the permissible 12-foot line, and it is worth noting that this site did previously have a dock and boathouse that were well beyond the 12-foot mark. Exactly what that was, I don't know, but I believe it was upwards of, it was more than 20 feet. So that did exist. It's my understanding that has since been removed from the property. So that would have been deemed nonconforming. Upon its removal, they had no nonconforming rights to reinstall or correct or improve that structure.
Do we know if that one was originally approved or if somebody just?
There
put
was
it in?
nothing in the file.
Okay, all right.
So my guess, it was probably pretty old, and it would have been considered nonconforming. It probably predated the ordinance by many, many years, is my guess.
Okay.
So really, this is the whole, in my opinion, and you've seen my review letter, I really think this is really our primary concern tonight, and this is what, to me, the whole case kind of hinges on. We want to make sure that this proposal to go beyond the conventional 12-foot line, that we're not going to end up disrupting use of the canal by the other owners in the area. They all have rights to use this as well, as does the property owner, but they all have rights. And the idea being, we don't want to allow something that it goes all the way to the middle, or something that decreases the navigable width by such a margin that it becomes difficult to pass, or that it becomes unpassable or impassable. So that to me is really the important thing, and we need to make sure we have a solid answer for that tonight. I think we're starting to piece that puzzle together. We've got roughly a 90-foot canal width. We've got a 20-foot encroachment on this side. Potentially, we did not find, unfortunately, we did not find anything in the file. This is the one that's sort of across the canal in terms of what its projection is. But when we start to do the quick math, we can start to whittle our way into whether or not that particular standard is compliant or not. And then my closing point is just that if the board does consider favorable action tonight, we would suggest, or we would like you to include a condition that petitioner has to go back and get approvals from Eagle and the Army Corps for their amended plans. So I don't envision that would be too difficult. They've already approved 40-foot dock, scaling it back to 20. I'm hopeful won't cause any issues there, but we want the file to be consistent moving forward. We don't want there to be a ZBA case granting a 20-foot dock, an Army Corps approval giving them a 40-foot dock, so that 10 years from now when somebody looks at the file, we're not really sure what happened. So that would be our suggestion if you're so inclined.
So, Brian, just a quick question. If we were to allow this variance because of some unusual characteristic of this property, and I don't know what it is, how do we take that into consideration for all the other properties on the canal that wish to go out 20 feet? Maybe you don't know the answer, but...
Well, so every case has to be viewed on its own merits. So if you believe the standards are met for this, then you should view it favorably. If you do not believe the standards are met, then you should not.
What standards are you talking about?
The review standards, the standards that you are to apply in making your decision. 23.5B.
Something unusual about the property.
Practical difficulties, substantial justice, preservation of property rights,
Got it.
extraordinary circumstances, etc.
In your presentation, you indicated the navigable waterway for adjacent property owners. I think the navigable waterway is for all members of the public, not just the people that live on the canal,
Fair enough.
because the canal is almost the length of the entire island, and it's not just the persons that have that waterfront that use that canal, so it's for everyone, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Fair enough. I think you understand my point, though.
All right.
Can't disrupt the canal. We can't block the canal.
Correct, but I just want to make sure
For
it's
anyone's use.
we're not just talking about the folks that live on the thoroughfare
Understood.
canal.
You all set, sir?
I am.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Kennedy has a question.
Brian, maybe this would be more appropriate after they've made the presentation, but I think we also have to consider, just in our evaluation, 17.5 or 17.5B4, the rafting or anchoring of boats within 15 feet of the middle of the navigable channel shall be prohibited. So what I see here is the presentation of floating docks that go out 20 feet.
Correct.
So my question would be, and maybe the boat will be moored to the side of that, but is the boat to be moored on the outside of that?
That will be a question for the applicant.
Okay, I'll hold off on that then.
Anybody else have any questions of Brian? No? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, does the petitioner want to step on up, please?
I am Garrick Wilson with Water's Edge Dock and Hoist. You need address too? 1340 West Coon Lake, and the applicant's address 19516 Park Lane, Grosseal, Michigan. So to clear some questions of the navigable waterway of the canal, the old structure that was there sat 39 feet off of the shoreline. That structure is now removed, and prior to removing that structure, the measurement from that structure to the structure on the other side of the canal that's up on the screen right now, that is 48 feet. So there's 48 feet prior to removing that structure of navigable water, and would be lessening that by 25 feet. So we're creating more navigable water.
So you have 68 feet now, is
Correct.
what you're saying? Okay.
68 feet of navigable water, so we're not applying for 2 variances.
Okay.
And then the original, I guess we don't need to go into that for the EGLE, but the EGLE, excuse me, like Brian had mentioned, for me to step the plans back to not going as far into the canal, that's nothing more than an email with a new set of plans, and they'll grant those to me, and they'll red stamp them, and then I can get those to you, so everything's concise all the way through from the Army Corps to the EGLE, and then to you guys, so everything's congruent. And I believe that's about all I have. Do you guys have any questions for me?
You know where in that dimension you gave us for the now distance of navigable water that the center line of the petitioner's property stops and the person across the canal starts? Do you know if it's exactly in the middle of that, or is it a lesser number?
Say that again, from the petitioner to the end of the...
Riparian rights of the petitioner go halfway across whatever the canal width is. Do you know where that halfway point is in your analysis of there now being 40-some feet?
They're saying 75 feet.
What'd you say?
What's
We
the
didn't
answer?
hear you.
Yeah, Jennifer's got a survey here too.
Can we see it?
And that shows, and just for the record, I'm showing that's where the end of the western riparian right would exist.
I believe so. We'll take a look here.
Oh, you got it.
Handy. That is cool.
Interesting. So where is north here? North is that way.
Can you help us make that out? It's not entirely, I believe where the name Park Lane is the front of the home, am I correct?
Yeah, so, yeah, Park Lane, this is the canal right there where his finger is.
That's the
We
center
go-
line of the canal?
Correct.
We go 79 feet into the water from the shore.
From Park Lane?
No, from the water's edge.
Okay, from the high water.
Right in here.
Okay,
We're 79 feet here and 73 feet here.
okay, thank you.
Do you guys want this up or can you give it back?
So, is everybody else set with this particular drawing?
I'm fine with it.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chair. Is this
Go ahead.
okay? When this is not the first time an application like this has been up in front of the ZBA. About 20 years or so ago, there was an application for a residential encroachment on the waterfront just like this. And the manner in which that it was proven that the canal, in fact, was navigable was that the applicant provided a depth sounding, basically every 3 feet or 5 feet out to show where the center of the canal navigable area actually was. And then it became very clear at that point when you found what the center was, where the 15 feet either way was, and then that gave a basis for the Zoning Board of Appeals to make a proper decision. Did you consider doing something like that?
I did not.
You didn't. Have you ever done something like that?
I have not, no.
Okay. Well,
The basis that I was going off was the width of the navigable width of the canal
Well, the width of the canal is not automatically the navigable width. Because that's what's unique about this particular property. Whereas farther down on the thoroughfare canal, it's channeled in, okay? And you basically have a step off from the shore into relatively deep water. What's unique about this is the fact that it's not a step off. It's a gradual grade. And at the 12-foot limit, you're only at 10 inches of water. Okay, and at 20, you're at let's see, yeah, at the 20-foot level, you're at 20 inches. Okay, so that's what's unique about this property. Is it's not a step off. You know, and just in thinking about it, obviously, if the edge of the dock is in 20 inches of water, 20 inches of water, I don't believe is considered navigable, or is it? I mean, because clearly bigger boats are going through and are going through farther out in the middle of the canal. So I'm trying to substitute some sort of logic here for the fact that you didn't provide us with data. If you had given us data, this is very straightforward. Okay, so, you know, I don't know how far we can go in making assumptions about what's there. The other way you could look at this is that the bridge. You know, when you look at the picture of the bridge farther down, the bridge is centered on the canal. Okay, on either side. That generally means that the channel is in the center, roughly speaking. So that's a good place to start in the way of assumptions. The other assumption to make is that when that previous structure was sticking out, what'd you say, 40 or 50 feet?
Yes.
Into the canal? Okay, there was still obviously navigation going on, but again, how far? I mean, how close was it? When I look farther down on Google Earth, at the narrow part just to the south, and just to the, no, it would be to the east. When I flashed to the east, southwest, that's what it was. Okay, and you saw that old structure that was sticking out there with the roof on it.
Yep.
Okay, that to the opposite side where the opposite structure was at, that width was 48 feet. Okay, so clearly that is a navigable area, and it's in roughly the center of the canal. This is kind of a stream of thought here, guys. I hope you can bear with me. You know, that to me tells me roughly that the canal, well, it's obvious. It's between the two obstructions on the shore. Okay, and that's only what, 100 feet to the southwest of where this property is at. So it strikes me that it's not an unreasonable assumption to say that channel is actually deep, and it's actually in the middle, give or take. Because on the one side you've got the bridge, which is clearly centered. On the other side you've got a 48-foot gap, okay, between the two structures, and this is dead set in the middle. So while I would definitely prefer to have hard data, and I really wish that would have been communicated, I'm willing at this point to make that assumption that it is there and that this as such would comply. And as far as I'm concerned, the hardship on this is the fact that it is the gradient of the canal is the reason why this is unique. That's it.
Okay.
Well, John, to that point, I looked at several other aerial maps of the canal that gave coloring, and looking at the coloring, it confirms kind of what you said, that it appears that the center of the canal is the deepest part of the canal. You could see where it would go from dark green, and then it would get to the bluish color, and it all came right together at the center of the overhead view of the canal.
That's a great point. I did not think about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just from my looking at it. And I also looked at that same image along the canal, Frenchman's Creek, Swan Canal, and it kind of confirmed my knowledge of those waterways, that was the deepest part of the canal. So I kind of agree with you on that, and I think that also sort of confirms it.
I would have to agree with both of you on those points. They're very good points, which leads me to believe that there's going to be at least 30 feet. It'll hit the standard of navigational waterway.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
one other point, and that was the point that was raised about the docking. Okay, what's the size of boat that's going to be there?
It's an 8.5 foot wide, 30 foot long pontoon.
So it's 8.5 foot, what'd you say, pontoon?
Pontoon, 30 foot long, yes.
Okay.
And that's going to have to be moored on the outside of your structure?
Will be,
Towards the center.
Be along there.
this is gone, no boat hoist. It's gonna be right there.
Okay, so
Aware that then brings into play that section that I referenced earlier. The rafting or anchoring of boats within 15 feet of the middle of the navigable channel shall be prohibited. So that's really
Mm-hmm.
has to be taken into consideration. So we're really going out a total of 35 feet. Excuse me?
Propose park, can we propose parking it right here then?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, see,
Maybe I'm misunderstanding this.
Yep.
talking about
The-
proposing parking the boat right here as opposed to on the side and extruding into the canal.
Well, I think with the measurements that we've already discussed, you would then be going out 28 feet. Did you say 8 foot wide? Or
8.5
Yeah,
foot.
so-
8.5 foot
28.5.
wide? So you'd be going out 28 feet. And looking at the measurements that we've already determined, I think you would still be in with the 15 feet of the center of the navigable area. Correct?
Mr. Chair, if we just run some quick math, I mean, if it's 90 foot wide, then 45 foot is the center line. 28 feet is not within 15 feet of 45.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if we
Correct, that's
accept
what
that
he's-
the center of
that's
the
what he's
canal
confirming.
is the center of the navigable water,
Correct.
taking that into consideration would still be acceptable. Okay. I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that.
and besides, if you couldn't anchor this or dock this boat in 10 inches of water anyway, then moving it up to the side isn't going to work anyway. So,
Jamming up on the beach.
Now, is that boat going to fit under the bridge?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's not very
Yeah.
very high.
If you get a lot of rain, you might
So-
have to duck.
It's a whole nother issue there, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions? From either the petitioners or Mr. Borden?
uh, Mr. Chair, do we have public comment on this besides the applicant?
Well, I just want to make sure we're done with the, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Nope, yep, we're gonna go back to public comment here in just one second. I just want to make sure we're all good with Mr. Borden and the petitioner.
Mr. Chairman, what is the draft of that boat?
Draft of the boat is 18 inches.
18 inches?
18.
Okay.
Good?
I have no more comment.
Anybody else, any more questions? Any more? Nope. Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, is there any more public comment, potential public comment on this? Sir, go ahead, step up, please, and, it doesn't matter, either one, whoever wants to go first. Just, state your name and address, please.
Nader Nordine, address is 19450 Park Lane.
Okay?
Okay, I have a question, like this type of dock that is being used, has it been used anywhere on the island, being a floating dock? I don't know if somebody can answer that. Is that, because the type of that dock, I believe it will accumulate a lot of debris. And especially the way the current going, it will affect my property that will have a lot of debris accumulation because it seems like it's a 90-degree enclosure, will cause a 90-degree enclosure, will accumulate all that debris on the northeast side of it. So I'd like some type of way, see like how this debris will be cleaned out. Because a normal dock will have posts and the debris will just go underneath it. Also, this type of dock, I believe, will cause more waves. I mean, that might create larger waves in this area and might disturb my side of property, will create more erosion. So I would like,
On how you think it would create more wave or waveable?
because it's enclosed, it's an enclosed,
So it's gonna basically transfer the wave from the solid dock to the shoreline?
to the shoreline, more waves will, yeah. That's all, I would like that to be taken in consideration, that's all.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Sir, go ahead.
Gary Lewandowski, 19395 Waterview. I'm the house that's directly across from the proposed dock with the covered, you saw it in the pictures there. That dock extends out into the water to 24 feet. The one that was there previously, I'm not sure the exact measurement, it was much further than, it was 40 feet or longer sticking out into the water. That area, if it's 90 feet, it's navigable between both of those docks. There's quite a bit of room there, and the depth is anywhere from 6 to 8 feet to low water times, it's 4 feet or more between where those two dock structures would be. So I bring this up because with that dock coming out 20 foot, even with a boat being moored on the outside, if that's a choice they make, there's still plenty of navigable room between there. I understand the points that the other gentleman made about debris collection. Frankly, I just don't have concerns or problems with it being, the variance being granted to them. I just want to make that comment.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you very much, I appreciate that.
questions, anyone?
I'm all set. Anybody have any questions of this gentleman? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the applicant. This dock, or floats, okay, what's the clearance? How deep is it? Is it down 5 inches, or how much current's going underneath it?
With no live load on it, it will draft 3/4 of an inch of water.
3/4 of an inch?
3/4 of an inch to an inch. And mind you, I install this in rivers for the state of Michigan. Have you guys ever used any ADA kayak launches or anything? I've done several on Belle Isle. I believe I've done a couple on Grosse Isle here, 1 or 2. But I do the stuff in rivers all the time. Probably 15 to 20 systems a year, nearly identical to this, and there's no issues of accumulation of debris on it. There's no sharp edges, so everything will roll off of it.
So the fact is, at the edge, at 20 inches of water, okay, if it's just sitting there without anybody on it, you've got 19 inches of flow underneath it, correct?
Correct.
Perfect, thank you.
I believe we have one of these floating type docks, the kayak docks right here to the water's edge, don't we? At the marina down here at the water's edge? It's in south end of the marina. It's the same type of dock system that floats.
I believe so.
Yeah. Well, I boat there. I dock my boat there, and I don't recall seeing any kind of accumulation of any debris or anything else around that particular dock, so I don't see that as a concern. Anybody else from the public or the comment section? Anybody else in the seats here? I can't see behind the podium here. Nope.
She's coming up.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So Water's Edge has done, I think, a good job of providing you guys with all the information, and I appreciate Brian's input on all of these issues. My husband and I spent quite a bit of time going over what the ZBA has to consider in order to, do your job. And so we appreciate you guys taking the time to look at this. We do think, I think everyone at this point hopefully would come to the conclusion that the 3 major points are basically that you've ensured that you've looked at all these carefully, right? The public safety and the fact that boats can safely navigate that waterway. I can tell you that for that, in light of that, I can tell you that the dock that existed when we purchased the home in October of 2021, that had been installed by Eric Carbajo from Community Renovations, who basically flipped the house and sold it to us. We have, still sitting in our yard, 7 pieces of 7-foot aluminum dock that went from the edge of the shore out to that boat port. So 7 times 7 is 49 feet, right? So that means that the boat port we had that was non-conforming, that we were told was non-conforming, and that we could not improve, more than 25%, right? Aesthetically, that we removed, that we paid Water's Edge to remove, was sitting 50 feet out into the canal, and it was nowhere near halfway. So I think what's fair is that the only thing you have before you that's been provided tonight that is something you can hang your hat on is a survey from a licensed surveyor, right? He's got, I think it's called a transom, right, that they shoot it with. He knows exactly what the dimensions are based on that, and he's telling us, based on the survey, the licensed survey, that the center of that canal and our riparian rights are 75 feet out. So I think that's consistent with what I'm telling you, that we have a 49-foot dock that went to the outside edge of that boat port, which sat at 50 feet, which was nowhere near the center. So I know that a lot of numbers have been thrown around here tonight, and I apologize that you don't have something more concrete, but I'm hoping that you find comfort in resting on that licensed survey that we brought with us that says that our riparian rights in the center of the canal is 75 feet from the shoreline. Our initial application that Water's Edge submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers and to the state of Michigan was for a total of 40 feet out. And I think we should all respect the fact that I don't think anybody probably knows these waterways better than the state and the feds, right? They have jurisdiction over that, and they probably could tell us if they were here today exactly what the depth is in the center, exactly what the depth is as you come out, exactly what the width is. But the fact that they felt comfortable in issuing a permit, to me, would be an indication that this is a reasonable request and that even what we requested from them was reasonable. So I appreciate that Water's Edge, in submitting this, wanted to be as amicable as possible, because the fact that there is a township ordinance that is there for good reason. There are very narrow areas, interior canals around Groseal that honestly could not accommodate more than 12 feet on either side. So the ordinance, and keeping the spirit of the ordinance, I think is important. I just don't think it's applicable to our situation because we have such a wide area at that particular point in the canal, which is what brings in the substantial justice and the fairness to us. So I just wanted to point those things out and tell all of you gentlemen that we appreciate, your job here. My husband and I are lifelong public servants, so we understand the importance of government at all levels, right? Local, county, state, and federal. And I think at this point, we've had all of these different government agencies weighing in, and I hope you guys have that you're comfortable making this decision. As homeowners, we would appreciate the board's consideration for what was already approved by the state and the feds. Because of the things that have been pointed out here, we're going to be in 20 inches of water on the outside of that. That is not very much water for us to be able to put a boat in and feel comfortable as this water goes up and down, as happens throughout the year, that we're not going to be, hitting bottom. Based on the survey, based on the fact that that old boat port we took out was 50 feet out in the water, I personally think that the original plan we had, and by the way, we do have pictures if you'd like to see them, of that dock in the water, because there was, I think, somewhat of a misunderstanding between the township and the contractor. The contractor thought as long as we have the state and federal permits, the township's going to be okay. So they had temporarily placed the dock in the water. And then the township came and said, listen, until you go before the ZBA, you need to pull that back out. So that's why you see it piled up in our yard. But when the dock was in the water, I wish you guys could have seen how much it did not interfere with navigable waterway. No different than the fact that that 50-year-old boat port that had been there since Dr. Timmons built it. Dr. Timmons built that house in 1950. And that boat port was there the whole time that he lived there and all the way through to the time we bought in 2021. And then we had Water's Edge take that boat port out. So we have improved the spirit of, we've tried to comply more with the spirit of the ordinance by making the waterway, the navigable waterway, actually wider than it has been for over 50 years. So I would ask if it's possible, and I don't know what your ability is within the confines of what was submitted to you, but I would ask that the board approve the 20 feet that was requested and not to exceed 30, so that we have that little bit of wiggle room, because I'm very concerned about how shallow it's going to be on the outside of that dock. But if you can't do that, then absolutely just go with what's before you, and we'll work it as best we can. And I think the other thing to consider is that, whether it's us or a future owner of our house, for them to have to come back before the board for another variance in order to get that extra 10 feet, if they want to put in a hoist or they want to extend the dock, would be somewhat burdensome. But at any rate, we appreciate your time, we appreciate your consideration, and if you have any questions for us, please let us know. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? No? Thank you, ma'am. Okay, gentlemen, is there any more discussion amongst the board regarding this issue? From my left or from my right? Oh, go ahead.
Well, she's just
Oh,
retrieving her picture.
okay, go ahead. More discussion? Sir, Ms. Caddy? Anything? Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion? I'll make a motion. I'm going to make a motion to approve the appeal, because I believe that it meets the practical difficulties, the substantial justice criteria. It also meets the public safety, welfare, and extraordinary circumstances, I believe. I also want to make the approval contingent upon the review of the DEQ and Eagle, or was it Army Corps and Eagle, to approve the revised plans before the docks are put back in the water and finished, the project's finished.
Support.
Okay, let's do the roll call vote. Mr. Schweikert?
Aye.
Ken Eagle?
Nay.
I am an aye.
Aye.
Appeal passes.
Just because it doesn't matter.
Lori, there was one more thing. Do they have to, once these are reviewed by the Eagle and Army Corps again, is that the only thing you need, or do they don't need to reapply for anything, do they? Okay. So is the petitioner clear that the permit still needs, you have to apply for the permit, I guess, again? And have to have it approved by the building department before you can continue? You understand that? Okay.
We'll supply too, once I get the corrected EGLE and Army Corps approvals of the ordinance that we just talked about, I'll supply that to you as well. Thank you.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay. Any more comments? Any more comments from the board? Anything, any miscellaneous things you want to bring up? No? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Support.
Support. Any nays? Adjourned. We're adjourned. Thank you.